Hey guys, what's up? Ashlyn here. So, let me take these off. My hair and my makeup is probably like a disaster mess right now. I apologize. But before we get started, I wanted to go ahead and share with you a couple things. I am 86 pages into Self Care by Lee Stein. Super good book. Love it. Absolutely love it. I watched Baby Teeth. Not into it. It's slow paced. It's got some great moments. Don't mind me. But but anyway, yeah, Baby Teeth, not the greatest. The book, however, was really good. Knives Out. My mom described it best when she said Clue on acid. It's absolutely amazing. It has so many different twists and turns. At the end, I thought I had it figured out. I was totally wrong. So, yeah. Just a couple of things that I recently watched and have currently been reading. So, now we're going to go ahead and jump back into Horseradish, Bitter Truths You Can't Avoid by Lemony Snicket. Last time we read this, we were on chapter 4. We got through chapter 4, so now we are on 5. And it says entertainment. It is one of life's bitterest truths that bedtime so often arrives just when things are really getting interesting. One second. Oh, I am so sorry. I forgot to tell you guys to grab your cup of coffee or your, as in my defense, chai latte and everything else, and grab your book or just grab a nice comfy spot on the couch, the bed, the chair, whichever you prefer, so we can get started. Ow, it's still hot. Oh my gosh. Okay. People often suggest when there is no entertainment available that one twiddle one's thumbs. Twiddling one's thumbs simply refers to an activity in which one's thumbs are rotated quickly in tiny, continuous circles, and twiddling one's thumbs is even more tiresome than the people who suggest twiddling one's thumbs think. So I recommend that the next time someone suggests you twiddle your thumbs, you find something else to twiddle instead. Interesting. I twiddle my fingers. I don't twiddle my thumbs. I do my fingers. When people ask if you play a certain sport, it is likely that they are very good at that sport and are hoping you are only mediocre so that you can waste an afternoon losing a game. In such instances, the safest action is to run away very quickly as soon as the question is asked. Okay. An apocryphal story, the word apocryphal here means obviously untrue, tells of two people long ago who were very bored, and then instead of complaining about it, they sat up all night and invented a game of chess so that everyone else in the world, on evenings when there is nothing to do, can also be bored by the perplexing and tedious game they invented. Chess is pretty fucking boring, to be honest. I used to be really quiet when you do it. It's like, what? Checkers is fun. Chess is not. One of the world's most popular entertainments is a deck of cards, which contains 13 each of 4 suits, highlighted by kings, queens, and jacks, who are possibly the queen's younger, more attractive boyfriends. Wishing, like sipping a glass of punch or pulling aside a bearskin rug in order to access a hidden trapdoor in the floor, is merely a quiet way to spend one's time before the candles are extinguished on one's birthday cake. Entertaining a notion like entertaining a baby cousin or entertaining a pack of hyenas is a dangerous thing to refuse to do. If you refuse to entertain a baby cousin, the baby cousin may get bored and entertain itself by wandering off and falling down a well. If you refuse to entertain a pack of hyenas, they may become restless and entertain themselves by devouring you. But if you refuse to entertain a notion, which is just a fancy way of saying that you refuse to think about a certain idea, you have to be much braver than someone who is merely facing some bloodthirsty animals or some parents who are upset to find their little darling at the bottom of a well, because nobody knows what an idea will do when it goes off to entertain itself. There is one and only one advantage to somebody who cannot play the violin, insisting on doing so anyway, and the advantage is that they often play so loudly they cannot hear if the audience is having a conversation. A good thing to do when one is sitting, eating, and resting is to have a conversation. It is always cruel to laugh at people, of course, although sometimes if they are wearing an ugly hat, it is hard to control yourself. What's that? A crazy, funky, chunky hat. Colors what? Hair unsightly. We've been there, we've done that. We see right through your crazy. Sorry. A Wizard of Oz reference. If you guys know it, like and comment down below, or just like this video. One of the world's tiresome questions is what object one would bring to a desert island, because people always answer a deck of cards or Anna Karenina, when the obvious answer is a well-equipped boat and a crew to sail me off the island and back home where I can play all the card games and read all the Russian novels I want. Everyone should be able to do one card trick, tell 2 jokes, and recite 3 poems in case they are ever trapped in an elevator. Chapter 6, Literature. No matter who you are, no matter where you live, and no matter how many people are chasing you, what you don't read is often as important as what you do read. I like that. Yes. An association of mine once wrote a novel called Corridors of Power, which told the story of various people discussing how the world has become a corrupt and dangerous place, and whether or not there are enough people with the integrity and decency necessary to keep the entire planet from descending into despair. I have not read this novel in several years because I participated in enough discussions on how the world has become a corrupt and dangerous place, and whether or not there are enough people with the integrity and decency necessary to keep the entire planet from descending into despair without reading about it in my leisure time. It is much, much worse to receive bad news through the written word than by somebody simply telling you, and I'm sure you understand why. When somebody simply tells you bad news, you hear it once, and that's the end of it. But when bad news is written down, whether in a letter or a newspaper or on your arm in felt tip pen, each time you read it, you feel as if you are receiving the news again and again. There are those who say that life is like a book, with chapters for each event in your life and a limited number of pages on which you can spend your time. But I prefer to think that a book is like a life, particularly a good one, which is well worth staying up all night to finish. A good library will never be too neat or too dusty, because somebody will always be in it, taking books off the shelves and staying up late reading them. Yay! I love that! Oh, books and libraries are like my go-to. I love it so much. A library is like an island in the middle of a vast sea of ignorance, particularly if the library is very tall and the surrounding area has been flooded. If writers wrote as carelessly as some people talk, then Adahazda as the bien, okay, don't know. Sometimes words are not enough. It's so true though. Like sometimes words are not enough. You have to have actions behind words. Honestly. Chapter 7, Travel. There are times to stay put and what you want will come to you, and there are times to go out into the world and find such a thing for yourself. What happens in a certain place can stain your feelings for that location. Just as ink can stain a white sheet, you can wash it and still never forget what has transpired. A word which here means happened and made everybody sad. A passport, as I'm sure you know, is a document that one shows to government officials whenever one reaches a border between countries, so the officials can learn who you are, where you were born, and how you look when photographed unflatteringly. Deciding whether or not to trust a person is like deciding whether or not to climb a tree, because you might get a wonderful view from the highest branch, or you might simply get covered in sap, and for this reason, many people choose to spend their time alone and indoors where it is harder to get a splitter. There are some who say that sitting at home reading is the equivalent of travel, because the experiences described in the book are more or less the same as the experiences one might have on a voyage, and there are those who say that there is no substitute for venturing out into the world. My own opinion is that it is best to travel extensively, but to read the entire time, hardly glancing up to look out of the window of the airplane, train, or hired camel. When you are traveling by bus, it is always difficult to decide whether you should sit in a seat by the window, a seat on the aisle, or a seat in the middle. If you take an aisle seat, you have the advantage of being able to stretch your legs whenever you like, but you have the disadvantage of people walking by you and they can accidentally step on your toes or spill something on your clothing. If you take a window seat, you have the advantage of getting a clearer view of the scenery, but you have the disadvantage of watching insects die as they hit the glass. If you take a middle seat, you have neither of these advantages, and you have the added disadvantage of people leaning all over you when they fall asleep. You can see at once why you should always arrange to hire a limousine or rent a mule rather than take the bus to your destination. Never trust anyone who has not brought a book with them. Chapter 8, Emotional Health. Let's eat it. I'm online shopping, guys. Sorry, and reading. I'm sure you have heard it said that appearance does not matter so much and that it is what's on the inside that counts. This is, of course, utter nonsense. Because if it were true, then people who were good on the inside would never have to comb their hair or take a bath, and the whole world would smell even worse than it already does. If an optometrist has had his left arm chewed off by an alligator, he might say in a pleasant and hopeful voice, "Well, this isn't too bad. I don't have my left arm anymore, but at least nobody will ever ask me whether I am right-handed or left-handed." But most of us would say something more along the lines of, "Ah, my arm, my arm." One of the most difficult things to think about in life is one's great regrets. Something will happen to you and you will do the wrong thing, and for years afterward you will wish you had done something different. If one's safety is threatened, one often finds courage and one didn't know one had. In times of extreme stress, one can often find energy hidden in even the most exhausted areas of the body. In an emergency, one often learns that one's companions can be of even less help in extraordinary circumstances than they are during an average evening. Shyness is a curious thing because, like quicksand, it can strike people at any time, and also, like quicksand, it usually makes its victims look down. Frustration is an interesting emotional state because it tends to bring out the worst in whoever is frustrated. Frustrated babies tend to throw food and make a mess. Frustrated citizens tend to execute kings and queens and make a democracy. And frustrated moths tend to bang up against light bulbs and make light fixtures all dusty. But unlike babies, citizens, and moths, leeches are quite unpleasant to begin with. The way sadness works is one of the strangest riddles of the world. When someone is crying, of course the noble thing to do is to comfort them. But if someone is trying to hide their tears, it may also be noble to pretend you do not notice them, so they will not be embarrassed. Unless you have been very, very lucky, Unless you have been very lucky, you have undoubtedly experienced events in your life that have made you cry. So unless you have been very lucky, you know that a good long session of weeping can often make you feel better, even if your circumstances have not changed one bit. Affairs of the Heart, Chapter 9. Love can change a person the way a parent can change a baby, awkwardly, and often with a great deal of mess. It is so rare in this world to meet a trustworthy person who truly wants to help you, and finding such a person can make you feel warm and safe, even if you are in the middle of a windy valley high up in the mountains. One of the remarkable things about love is that, despite very irritating people writing poems and songs about how pleasant it really is quite pleasant. Bad circumstances have a way of ruining things that would otherwise be pleasant. It is often difficult to admit that someone you love is not perfect, or to consider aspects of a person that are less than admirable. In love, as in life, one misheard word can be tremendously important. If you tell someone you love them, for instance, you must be absolutely certain that they have replied, "I love you" back, and not "I love your" back, before you continue the conversation. It is a curious thing that the death of a loved one. We all know that our time in this world is limited and that eventually all of us will end up underneath some sheet never to wake up. And yet, it is always a surprise when it happens to someone we know. It is like walking up the stairs to your bedroom in the dark and thinking there is one more stair than there is. Your foot falls down through the air, and there is a sickly moment of dark surprise as you try and readjust the way you thought of things. Grief, a type of sadness that most often occurs when you have lost someone you love, is a sneaky thing, because it can disappear for a long time and then pop back up when you least expect it. You need to take a drink, you can. We're almost done. It is so loud today. Everyone at some point in their lives wakes up in the middle of the night with the feeling that they are all alone in the world, and that nobody loves them now, and that nobody will ever love them, and that they will never have a decent night's sleep again, and will spend their lives wandering blearily around a loveless landscape, hoping desperately that their circumstances will improve, but suspecting in their heart of hearts that they will remain unloved forever. The best thing to do in these circumstances is to wake someone else up so that they can feel this way too. Chapter 10, A Life of Mystery. There are tiresome people who say that if you ever find yourself in a difficult situation, you should stop and figure out the right thing to do. But there are times in this harem-scarum world when figuring out the right thing to do is quite simple, but doing the right thing is simply impossible, and then you must do something else. Saying that something is half the battle is like saying something is half a sandwich, because it is dangerous to announce that something is half the battle when the much more difficult part might still be waiting in the wings. As I'm sure you know, the key to good eavesdropping is not getting caught. When listening at someone else's door, always have an excuse prepared so that when they fling the door open to glare at you, you will have something reasonable to say. Okay. In general, of course, a stranger who tries to get you into an automobile is anything but noble, and in general, a person who quotes great American novelists is anything but treacherous, and in general, a man who says you needn't worry about money or a man who smokes cigarettes is somewhere in between. The trouble with doing something suspicious for a living is that your coworkers will likely be suspicious too, and you will find yourself entangled in a web of suspicion even during your lunch hour. What's a lunch hour, guys? Can anybody tell me? No idea. Having an aura of menace is like having a pet weasel, because you rarely meet someone who has one, and when you do, it makes you want to hide under the coffee table. There are many difficult things in this world to hide, but a secret is not one of them. Ow. Oh hey, the Browns are going against the Titans soon. It is very easy to say that the important thing is to try your best, but if you are in real trouble, the most important thing is not trying your best, but getting to safety. Normally, it is not polite to go into somebody's room without knocking, but you can make an exception if the person is dead or pretending to be dead. Okay. Announcing your death should be like announcing that you are a lunar moth. It must be done quietly or it will not be believed. Chapter 11, The Mystery of Life. It is difficult when faced with a situation you cannot control to admit that you can do nothing. Wow, this is a big one. Morning is an important time of day because how you spend your morning can often tell you what kind of day you are going to have. For instance, if you wake up to the sound of twittering birds and find yourself in an enormous canopy bed with a butler standing next to you holding a breakfast of freshly made muffins and hand-squeezed orange juice on a silver tray, you will know that your day will be a splendid one. If you wake up to the sound of church bells and find yourself in a fairly big regular bed with a butler standing next to you holding a breakfast of hot tea and toast on a plate, you will know that your day will be okay. And if you wake up to the sound of somebody banging two metal pots together and find yourself in a small bunk bed with a nasty foreman standing in the doorway holding no breakfast at all, you will know that your day will be horrid. I don't know. I woke up to birds and in a giant bed and decided to make some coffee and start reading and record with you guys. So I think my day's gonna be pretty good. Hopefully. Sometimes even in the most unfortunate of lives, there will occur a moment of two of good fortune. Occasionally, events in one's life become clearer through the prism of experience, a phrase which simply means that things tend to become clearer as time goes on. For instance, when a person is just born, they usually have no idea what curtains are and spend a great deal of their first months wondering why on earth mommy and daddy have hung large pieces of cloth over each window in the nursery. But as a person grows older, the idea of curtains becomes clearer through the prism of experience. The person will learn the word curtains and notice that they are actually quite handy for keeping a room dark when it is time to sleep and for decorating an otherwise boring window area. Eventually, they will entirely accept the idea of curtains and may even purchase some curtains of their own or Venetian blinds, and it is all due to the prism of experience. This book is really interesting. Like curtains of all things as a prism of experience is very, very different. Mm-hmm. Oh, excuse me, that was disgusting. I'm so sorry if you heard that. One wanders through life as if wandering through a field in the dark of night, wearing a blindfold and very heavy shoes, with the poisonous toad waiting patiently beneath a clump of weeds, knowing full well that eventually you will step on him. It is one of the peculiar truths of life that people often say things that they know full well are ridiculous. If someone asks you how you are, for example, you might automatically say fine, thank you, when in fact you have just failed an examination or been trampled by an ox. A friend might tell you, I've looked everywhere in the world for my keys, when you know that they have actually only looked in a few places in the immediate area. Once I said to a woman I loved very much, I'm sure that this trouble will end soon, and you and I will spend the rest of our lives together in happiness and bliss, when I actually suspected that things were about to get much worse. Fate is like a strange, unpopular restaurant filled with odd waiters who bring you things you never ask for and don't always like. Deciding on the right thing to do in a situation is a bit like deciding on the right thing to wear to a party. It is easy to decide on what is wrong to wear to a party, such as deep-sea diving equipment or a pair of large pillows. But deciding what is right is much trickier. The truth is that you can never be sure if you have decided on the right thing until the party is over, and by then it is too late to go back and change your mind, which is why the world is filled with people doing terrible things and wearing ugly clothing. Okay. It is very difficult to make one's way in this world without being wicked at one time or another, when the world's way is so wicked to begin with. Facts. One of the greatest myths in the world, and the phrase greatest myths is just a fancy way of saying big fat lies, is that troublesome things get less and less troublesome if you do them more and more. People say this myth when they are teaching children to ride bicycles, for instance, as though falling off a bicycle and skinning your knee is less troublesome and 14th time you do it than it is the first time. The truth is that troublesome things tend to remain troublesome no matter how many times you do them, and that you should avoid doing them unless they are absolutely urgent. One cannot spend forever sitting and solving the mysteries of one's history. Chapter 12. An overall feeling of doom that one cannot ever escape no matter what one does. That is a long title. Hi. Are you still sleeping? You're like, yep. Destiny is something you cannot escape, such as death, or a cheesecake that has curdled, both of which always turn up sooner or later. Everybody will die, of course, sooner or later. Circus performers will die, and clarinet experts will die, and you and I will die, and there might be a person who lives on your block right now who is not looking both ways before he crosses the street and who will die in just a few seconds, all because of a bus. Everybody will die, but very few people want to be reminded of that fact. Assumptions are dangerous things to make, and like all dangerous things to make, bombs for instance, or strawberry shortcake, if you make even the tiniest mistake, you can find yourself in terrible trouble. For instance, one morning you might wake up and make the assumption that your bed was in the same place that it always has, or always was, even though you would have no real evidence that this was so. But when you got out of your bed, you might discover that it had floated out to sea, and now you would be in terrible trouble, all because of the incorrect assumption that you'd made. You can see that it is better not to make too many assumptions, particularly in the morning. Taking one's chances is like taking a bath, because sometimes you end up feeling comfortable and warm, and sometimes there is something terrible lurking around that you cannot see until it is too late and you can do nothing else but scream and cling to a plastic duck. The thing you hope will never happen to you might just happen to someone else instead, who has been spending their life dreading the thing that will happen to you. If you have ever found yourself sitting in darkness with a flashlight, you may have experienced the feeling that something is lurking just beyond the circle of light that a flashlight makes, and reading a poem about dead men is not a good way to make yourself feel better. Many old folk tales portray death as a cloaked figure who knocks on the doors of the souls he has come to whisk away, but that is not always the way of the world. Sometimes death may approach the door very slowly and very loudly, so that by the time he knocks, everyone in the neighborhood is aware of his approach, or he may prefer to pick the lock of the back door and sit up all night in your kitchen until you stroll downstairs in your bathrobe and learn that he has been waiting for you, sitting in your favorite chair and rearranging your silver when he got bored. There are some who go through life with a shadow hanging over them, particularly if they live in a building which has low, wide awnings. I heard once of a man who wanted desperately to be remembered after his death, so he spent his youth writing and rewriting his last words, and his old age repeating them every 5 minutes, so that if he died at that moment, the words he had prepared would be overheard by someone. At last, on his deathbed, someone asked him the time. Waiting is one of life's hardships. 13. Chapter 13, guys. I think this is the last chapter, and this is miscellaneous. Never look a gift line in the mouth. There are many, many things that are difficult in this life, but one thing that isn't difficult at all is figuring out whether someone is excited or not when they open a present. If someone is excited, they will often put exclamation points at the ends of their sentences to indicate their excited tone of voice. If they say, "oh," for instance, the exclamation point would indicate that the person is saying "oh" in an excited way rather than simply saying "oh" with a comma after it, which would indicate that the present is somewhat disappointing. Just about everything in this world is easier said than done, with the exception of systematically assisting susceptible sister, which is easier done than said. What are you doing? Of all the ridiculous expressions people use, and people use a great many ridiculous expressions, one of the most ridiculous is "no news is good news." No news is good news simply means that if you don't hear from someone, everything is probably fine, and you can see at once why this expression makes such little sense. Because everything being fine is only one of many, many reasons why someone may not contact you. Perhaps they are tied up, maybe they are surrounded by fierce weasels, or perhaps they are wedged tightly between two refrigerators and cannot get themselves out. The expression might well be changed to "no news is bad news," except that people may not be able to contact you because they have just been crowned king or are competing in a gymnastics tournament. The point is that there is no way to know why someone has not contacted you until they contact you and explain themselves. For this reason, the sensible expression would be "no news is no news," except that it is so obvious it is hardly an expression at all. If you are allergic to a thing, it is best not to put that thing in your mouth, particularly if the thing is cats. Are you allergic to cats? Stealing, of course, is a crime and a very impolite thing to do, but like most impolite things, it is excusable under certain circumstances. Stealing is not excusable if, for instance, you are in a museum and you decide that a certain painting would look better in your house and you simply grab the painting and take it there. But if you were very, very hungry and you had no way of obtaining money, it might be excusable to grab the painting, take it to your house, and eat it. Interesting. Sometimes when someone tells a ridiculous lie, it is best to ignore it entirely. No. The expression "following suit" is a curious one because it has nothing to do with walking behind a matching set of clothing. If you follow suit, it means you do the same thing somebody else has just done. If all of your friends decided to jump off a bridge into the icy waters of an ocean or river, for instance, and you jumped in right after them, you would be following suit. You can see why following suit can be a dangerous thing to do, because you could end up drowning simply because somebody else thought of it first. It is very unnerving to be proven wrong, particularly when you are really right, and the person who is really wrong is the one who is proving you wrong and proving himself wrongly right. Right? What? Having a personal philosophy is like having a pet marmoset, because it may be very attractive when you acquire it, but there may be situations when it will not come in handy at all. And finally, the quoting of an aphorism like the angry barking of a dog or the smell of overcooked broccoli rarely indicates that something helpful is about to happen. Lemony Snicket is the author of 13 books collectively entitled A Series of Unfortunate Events, as well as the supplementary materials, The Beatrice Letters, and Lemony Snicket, the Unauthorized Autobiography. A lifelong resident, he now divides his time and is currently at work. Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so I think the next one I want to do, I've already read all of the series of unfortunate events books. Like, that was my thing before the movie ever even came out or was a thing. The Beatrice letter sounds interesting, and the unauthorized autobiography of Lemony Snicket sounds even better. So that was Horseradish, Bitter Truths You Can't Avoid by Lemony Snicket, and now it makes more sense as to why they were so off the wall. But really quick, I wanted to jump back into self-care. This is a really good book, like I said. I will read the back portion of it. Just this little part right here is perfect. Have you ever scrolled through Instagram and seen countless influencers who seem like experts at caring for themselves, from their yoga crop tops to their well-lit, clean meals to their serum skin and rooted but color-coded reading stacks? Self-care delves into the lives and psyches of people working in the wellness industry and exposes the world behind the filter. The female co-founders of a wellness startup struggle to find balance between being good people and doing good business while trying to stay BFFs. And they go through a company-imposed digital detox because she tweeted something terrible about the president's daughter, and as the CEO of Ritual, the most inclusive community platform for women to cultivate the practice of self-care and change the world by changing ourselves, it's a PR nightmare. So they make her go through a digital detox. And it's super, super good. Like, I didn't think it was going to be as good as it was, but I literally picked it up because it says self-care. And I thought that this was going to be like a step guide book to, like, personal self-care. It does have steps in it. However, it is more based on the cold-hearted truth behind influencers, like Instagram people that you always see on Instagram sitting there saying, oh my God, look at my outfit. And I lost all this weight with this little detox tea thing, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it goes based into the lives of that, and I really, really, really am enjoying it so much. I don't want to put it down half the time. And I was going to read it to you guys, but it's a 2020 release, so I cannot do that yet. But it'll definitely be one that I will read in the near future. But yeah, with all that being said, we're completely almost out of our chai latte, so we made it through that. Made it through another book, so we can add that to the Goodreads list before the end of the year. If you guys have Goodreads, I want to know how many books you've read this year. Any number is a good number, okay? Honestly. Anytime you pick up a book, it could be one book. You still picked up a book and you read, and you did something that was productive. Not saying that your life isn't productive, but saying more along the lines of, like, you did something that didn't deal with technology. Or you did deal with it and it was technology, but you weren't invested into a bunch of different things. You actually sat down, you read, you understood the story. If you did that, I want to see a like down below. And you should really subscribe. And honestly, in the comments down below, you can also give me like books that you'd like to have me read. If you don't have time to read, I completely understand. This is like the best way to do it, is just like an audiobook and things like that. So I really hope that I hear from you. I can't wait. This was so much fun. I'm going to be jumping back into Follow Me Back by A.V. Geiger really, really soon. I apologize that it's taken so long. I literally see the book up there in my book stack. But I've been, like I said, I've been reading this one and watching a bunch of movies. I've been getting through my YouTube watch later list so that I've been adding more items to my YouTube watch later list. Like, my list is ridiculous. I wonder if I can pull it up. Let me see if I can pull it up for you, because it is absolutely 100% ridiculous. I literally just got it down to like 200 videos the other day from like 500, and I'm already back up. Yeah. 324 videos in the watch later list. But I really hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope to hear from you soon, and I will see you later, and stay safe. Bye, guys.